Picture this: a bustling city where people once roamed freely and ideas sparked like wildfire. Fast forward to now, and it's more like a dystopian carnival where the rides are rigged, the clowns have hidden agendas, and everyone's too terrified to speak up about the absurdity of it all. Welcome to the modern age. Alright, let's start with a confession. Most of us, at some point, have become comfortable little conformists. We've cozied up in our echo chambers, swapped our thinking caps for dunce hats, and let our spines melt into a gooey puddle of complacency. Meanwhile, authoritarianism is strutting its stuff like it owns the place. And you know what? It kind of does. Why? Because we've let conformity and lack of courage do the heavy lifting for the power-hungry overlords of the world. First, let's get something straight. Authoritarianism isn't just a guy with a mustache barking orders in some distant land. It's a sneaky, insidious thing that creeps into our lives under the guise of safety, security, and most dangerously, normalcy. It tells us that as long as we stay in line, keep our heads down, and don't make any waves, everything will be just peachy. And like good little soldiers, we comply. The problem is, conformity is the fertile soil in which authoritarianism plants its seeds. When we all start thinking the same, dressing the same, and, heaven forbid, tweeting the same, we're essentially handing over our power on a silver platter. We create a monoculture of thought where dissent is not just discouraged, but seen as an existential threat. Take a look at our daily routines. We wake up, scroll through the same sanitized news feeds, like the same pictures, consume the same vanilla opinions, and pat ourselves on the back for being such good, obedient citizens. It's as if our brains have collectively decided to take a holiday, leaving our critical thinking faculties stranded somewhere on a deserted island. You'd think, with all our technological advances and supposed enlightenment, we'd be moving towards a more open and free society, but no. Apparently, the allure of power and control is just too tempting. Governments around the world are tightening their grip, consolidating power, and turning citizens into obedient, docile sheep. It's like a bad remake of George Orwell's 1984. Take a look around, and you'll see the signs everywhere. The relentless rise of taxes, for example. Once upon a time, taxes were a necessary evil, a means to fund public services and infrastructure. But somewhere along the line, they morphed into a monstrous hydra, with governments continually adding new heads to this fiscal beast. Every paycheck feels like a grim exercise in subtraction, as the taxman takes his hefty cut, leaving you to wonder if you're working for your own dreams, or just funding an ever-expanding bureaucratic machine. It's as if those in power took a leaf out of Robin Hood's book, but instead of redistributing wealth, they're hoarding it to build castles of inefficiency and red tape. Ayn Rand would be aghast. Her philosophy of objectivism revered the sanctity of individual effort and the right to enjoy the fruits of one's labor. To Rand, excessive taxation is nothing short of legalized plunder, a coercive tool that punishes success and stifles innovation. And she's not wrong. As taxes climb higher, the entrepreneurial spirit gets buried under a mountain of paperwork and financial strain. The government's voracious appetite for revenue becomes a deterrent to ambition, disincentivizing hard work and enterprise. Instead of fostering a society of bold, innovative thinkers, we end up with a population that views mediocrity as the safer, more economically viable option. So while we dutifully fill out our tax forms and watch our earnings vanish into the abyss, one can't help but question, are we funding our own demise? Next up, censorship, the fine art of silencing dissenting voices and curating a narrative that's as sanitized as a hospital operating room. It used to be that censorship was the domain of dictatorships and regimes with inferiority complexes. Now, it's creeping into every corner of society like a particularly stubborn mold. Social media platforms wield their algorithms like digital guillotines, cutting off any voice that dares to stray from the approved script. Mainstream media outlets serve up stories with all the depth and nuance of a toddler's coloring book. And the general public? They're too busy chasing after the next viral video to notice. Rollo May, the existential psychologist, warned us about this. He spoke of the dangers of conformity and the loss of individual will. When people are too afraid to speak their minds, creativity and progress die a slow, painful death. We become mere shadows of ourselves, living in a monochrome world where the only acceptable thoughts are the ones that fit neatly into the pre-approved boxes. It's like being stuck in an eternal rerun of a bland TV show. So why is authoritarianism thriving? Because we've made it so damn easy. By conforming, we create an environment where authoritarian ideas can flourish unchallenged. When everyone thinks the same, Anyone who questions the status quo is seen as an outcast, a troublemaker, a threat. This uniformity of thought makes it a cakewalk for those in power to impose their will, knowing full well that the masses won't put up much of a fight. And let's face it, those in power have mastered the art of playing on our fears. They tell us that we need more surveillance to keep us safe, more laws to keep us in line, more control to maintain order. And we, in our infinite cowardice, nod along, grateful for the illusion of security. We've become so afraid of the unknown, so terrified of stepping out of line, that we've willingly handed over our freedoms in exchange for the comforting lie that everything is under control. But here's the kicker. The more we conform, the more we encourage authoritarianism. It's a vicious cycle. Conformity breeds control, control breeds fear, and fear breeds more conformity. Before you know it, you're living in a world where questioning authority is equivalent to treason, where thinking differently is a punishable offense, and where the brave souls who dare to speak out are silenced, marginalized, or worse. And this brings us to the lack of courage. Rollo May, who had a knack for seeing through our BS, talked a lot about courage. He saw it as the keystone of a meaningful life, the antidote to the malaise of modern existence. Courage, in May's eyes, wasn't just about heroic acts in the face of danger. It was about the everyday bravery required to live authentically, to speak out, and to stand up for what you believe in. But let's be real here. Courage is in short supply these days, in a society where fitting in has become more important than standing out. Courage is the first casualty. We've traded boldness for the safety of the herd. We silence our own voices to avoid rocking the boat. We let the loudest, most authoritarian voices dominate the conversation, because confronting them would require the kind of bravery that disrupts our comfortable routines. It's easier to conform than to be courageous. Ayn Rand's philosophy was all about the strength of the individual, the power of personal integrity, and the importance of living by one's own judgment. She saw collectivism and conformity as the death knell of progress and innovation. When people are too afraid to stand out, to question, to challenge, society stagnates. We become a legion of drones, marching in lockstep towards a bleak and controlled future. And yet, here we are, in a world where courage is more likely to be found in a Marvel movie than in real life. People are so afraid of offending others, so worried about stepping out of line, that they've become experts at self-censorship. We tiptoe around sensitive topics, avoid controversial opinions, and shy away from anything that might cause a ripple. It's like we're all living in a perpetual game of don't break the ice, too scared to make a move in case the whole thing comes crashing down. It's a tough pill to swallow, but the truth is, people are becoming more cowardly. We've traded the rugged individualism of the past for a culture of dependency and fear. We look to authority figures to tell us what to think, what to do, and how to live our lives. Rollo May saw this coming. He warned that a society that suppresses individuality and discourages dissent would breed a culture of fear and cowardice. When people are too afraid to stand up for themselves, to assert their own beliefs, and to challenge the status quo, they become passive, compliant, and ultimately, powerless. It's a slow erosion of the human spirit, a descent into mediocrity and resignation. And as we become more cowardly, we become more susceptible to control, more willing to accept the unacceptable, and more inclined to trade our freedom for the illusion of safety. So, what's the solution? How do we break free from this downward spiral of authoritarianism, censorship, excessive taxation, and increasing cowardice? It starts with recognizing the problem and refusing to accept it as the new normal. We must resist the allure of conformity and embrace the courage to stand out, to speak up, and to take risks. In the words of Rollo May, the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it is conformity. And in the spirit of Ayn Rand, the question isn't who is going to let me, it's who is going to stop me. We need to channel these philosophies to become champions of freedom. In the end, it's up to us. We have the power to shape our destiny, to create a society that values freedom, individuality, and courage. But it won't happen by itself. Remember, the rise of authoritarianism isn't just a product of evil masterminds plotting in dark rooms. It's the result of everyday people choosing the path of least resistance, the safety of conformity over the risk of courage. So be brave, speak out, think for yourself. Because in the end, the power to shape the future lies with the individuals who refuse to be controlled.